Hi everyone, it's Paula from Pola Quilting. Welcome back to my channel. So in one of the previous tutorials I showed you how I made a quilt using my Nigerian scraps, and because I changed the layout of the quilt I had some blocks left, so I went ahead and I used up all the remaining scraps to make more blocks. And then anything shorter I have put on the adding tape. So I will link it in the description below, both of those tutorials, how to do those blocks and how to do the adding tape. And what I would like to do in this tutorial is use up some or most of those blocks again to make more contemporary type quilts. So for me contemporary means a little bit calmer and maybe not so much colors in it, or if there are colors they're kind of offset with some background fabric which make it calmer. So I'm choosing white as a background, and there will be a lot of white in that quilt, but obviously you can use any background color which will go with your blocks. I could use, and I was thinking about it, some crumb blocks, cream white crumb blocks, but unfortunately I don't have enough scraps to make that many to fit it within that quilt, because I want to have a nice big quilt this time. So it's not going to be baby quilt size, it's going to be probably single bed quilt size. And what I will be using is obviously those adding tape strips, which are not necessarily standard size strips, and I will be trying to mix it with the standard size, and I will show you how I go about it to make sure I don't have, you know, rows in or columns with different widths, so that will be covered. But you know, it will add a lot of color to that quilt. Let's get started. Right, so I kind of drafted what I want to achieve. I want to have a nice big quilt, kind of single bed size. So I kind of went with my magic number split here. However, because the strips from the counting tape, they are not actual 2.5 inches, it will be a little bit bigger, but you know, it doesn't matter, you know, overall. So how I design my quilt, the blocks are 10.5 inch tall, so I have checked on my cheat sheet for the single size bed, I need to have 7 of those blocks. Now this way, so the square is obviously 10.5, but I will be adding those strips here, either the adding tape strips or just the plain white strips. So they will be more or less 12.5. I mean, those will be a little bit bigger, but I'm doing the math based on 12.5 inch blocks, so I need 5 this way. So I kind of designed that quilt, so all of those darker red ones are my lock cabins, all of those blue strips are my adding tape strips, and everything else is white. I just wanted, like I've mentioned, a little bit more contemporary quilt with a lot of the background. So that's how I've designed it. How it will look, we see. So I've calculated how many of each blocks do I need. So I need 14 10.5 squares in the color, the log cabins. I need 14 strips in color, so those are my adding tape ones. 21 10.5 inch squares, and 14 2.5 by 10.5 white strips. So that's the whole measurement. Now there are 2 blocks somewhere here which are actually full white, so you could potentially cut it 12.5 by 10.5, but it was just easier to kind of do it that way rather than remembering about those 2 extra blocks. So that's how I did it. So the first thing I can do is to every color square I need to add 2.5 inch strip, and to every white one I need to add my adding tape strip, except of 1 2 3 4 5 white and 2 color. I will take them out of the pile, and then I can chain piece everything else, because that's how they go in the design. And then I can just see what is left and link all of those things together. So here is my pile of the cut fabric. So those are my 14 color strips and 14 white strips, and then 21 of the white squares, and then I will have a 14 of the color squares. Now I did mention that those strips are not even because obviously you can see the adding tape one is wider than the 2.5 inch. That's about 3 inches, this one. The key thing is there needs to be the even amount of number of those strips in all of the rows. If I've got the same number in each of the rows, that means my width of that whole row will be the same. So that's how I designed that that quilt. So works on the paper. We'll see how it works when I actually start putting the quilt together. Okay, so I've got my piles ready. I've put away the ones I don't want to put any strips on, because there are those last ones without any extra bits, so I can crack on with the chain piecing. Now with these ones I think I would like to have a strip either here or here. I don't want the strip on where the frame is, so I will just go with that, and I can basically chain piece everything, and then I'm gonna have to decide on actual layout which way they will be going, but for that I will need a floor. So let's get some chain piecing going. I am going to narrow down the stitch length a little bit, because again there's a lots of seams on those blocks, and the more seams I like to use the narrower stitch. And also I have not yet removed the paper from my adding tape pieces. I will do that once I've got them stitched at least on one side to another block. It's just, it will keep those seams on those pieces quite secure. I finished stitching my block, so I've got my white strips or colorful, and then 2.5 strips sewn together. There's quite a lot of negative space, but I really like how it looks. It kind of makes those colorful strips to pop out from the background. Great quilt for those who like quilting part of the process, because you have lots of those negative spaces to, you know, to have a play with. But if you don't like quilting, or you're not there yet, just wavy lines all over it, and it will be great too. This is probably how I will quilt it anyway, so I will show it to you on my Facebook page when it's done. As mentioned, those strips are different widths, so what you want to remember when you're mixing the widths of the strips, and they are not necessarily any particular size you can match up together, is just make sure there are the same amount of those strips in all of the rows, then the row will still match, even though you know, you have different sizes here. So that's one thing. So normally when I'm putting the quilt together, I'll just take each columns and kind of sew them together, and another column. I wouldn't cut any threads in between the blocks, and it would hold itself together. But because those blocks are different sizes, so this block will have a different size than this one because of those strips, which are different widths. I will first do each row individually, and then I will put the rows together. Now because those strips are different, the blocks are different, normally I work on those reference points. So basically every time you can chain piece and then nest the blocks together in these corners, those are my reference points, which means that those blocks need to meet there, you know, as best as they can. They don't have to be perfect, but they need to meet in that point as best as they can. But here I won't have reference points, because like I said, this block is different to this one. The reference point will not exist, but I still want to sew those two rows nice and you know, even together. So Here there will be reference points because those two blocks are the same, but when I get to here I will need to create some of the reference points and to make sure it's nice and you know, even. So I will show you when I get to that point how to go about it. Okay, I've got my rows 1 and 2 sewn together. I haven't removed the paper yet, it's still on here, and I will remove it when I have them stitched, you know, in the whole quilt. Go through it, you know, in one go. I also marked with pins my row 1 and 2 so I don't mix them up. And as mentioned, some of the blocks will match, some will not, so we need to create those reference points where they don't. So this one will match because the two of those blocks are the same, so that's quite easy job. So I will just put a pin here. I don't have to pin anything at the beginning because they do matching. Let's carry on and see what else we can match or not match. So the next block will not match because the blocks are different. There's a little bit of difference, not big difference, probably like I don't know, probably even less than half an inch, but there is a difference, so we need to kind of keep an eye on that one. Now, because those two blocks equals the other two on the other side, this one now here will match or should match, so I can pin in this spot. And the last one, let's see, again will match because those are the same size of the blocks. So really between the first and second row there's not much we need to kind of keep an eye on. It's really just this one section here. So because I've got pins at the beginning and the end of this section, if I will make it now straight and flat, I can put a pin in the middle here. So that's my reference point I'm actually creating because there's nothing nesting there. And just for a good measure, I will put 1 or 2 pins in those sections as well, to make sure they do not shift as I'm sewing. And I will work in the same way throughout the whole quilt. I will pin just to hold in place where the blocks are matching, and then put extra pins where the blocks do not match, so I don't have any shifting. So, and then the rest is sewing as usual. And also as usual, I do advise you to have the work you've sewn already on the top, because where we do nest, we need to make sure we kind of keep an eye on the seams, which way they're going. So if you have the work you've sewn on the top, you know which way you need to go on here. The other one will, you know, the one at the bottom will just go different direction to the one at the top. So you don't have to kind of turn your work all the time. Alright, so I will carry on stitching the top together, and I will show you when it's ready how it looks. I finished sewing all of my top, and I will show you in a minute how it looks. But just to add a little bit about the seam. So as mentioned, I've tried to nest everything which was linking in the right places, so that's fine, that's normal process. Just around those strips, because they are quite thick, they naturally require to go flat, and where I could, I went with it. You know, I wasn't changing direction of the seams there if I didn't have to, but where I did have to is where, you know, maybe they were coming on top of each other. So as you can see, I haven't removed the paper yet, and I was sewing with the paper on, but where I had to sew on the paper, I actually have been removing a little bit of the paper at the top, so I don't have a problem later with some corners here. So that's just a little bit of information there for you if you're working with the papers as well. So let me put it on the floor. I won't be ironing it yet because I normally iron my tops just before I quilt them, so obviously that's not going to happen yet. But I will show you what the whole top look like. I really like it, so let's have a look at it. And this is my contemporary Nigerian fabric quilt. I really like how it came out. It kind of makes all of those strips pop up much better if I have put all of those blocks together without any background fabric. You don't have to use white, you can use any other you know, shade, but I would recommend, if you like this type of design, you probably would like to go with the solid colors rather than pattern, or if the pattern is very light, that will work too. If you watch one of my previous videos about how I fixed my messed up free motion quilting, I did mention that I really actually enjoyed the hand quilting process. So with all of those negative spaces on this quilt, I might actually do some hand quilting as well, using probably some floss thread. So I think the plan will be just quickly quilt it on the machine with just, you know, cream color, so it kind of blends in, and then add some sort of details to the quilt with those threads. So if you would like to see how it kind of finished, please be sure to join me on either Facebook with Pola Quilting with Friends group, or on the Instagram, and all the details are in the description below. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed the process, and perhaps you will use some of those tips and tricks in your own designs. As usual, a layout of the quilt will be available to download from Pola Quilting with Friends Facebook page, and I will pop it quickly in a second here as well for those who are not on the Facebook, so you can pause and perhaps make your own notes. As usual, all tutorials and other information mentioned in this video will be linked in the description below, so you can follow up where needed. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.